I didn't notice the first omen until the espresso machine began hissing after hours. The cafe was dark, the street empty, the sign flipped to closed, yet the steam wand bled a slow breath like an animal that refused to sleep. I stood in the doorway with the keys still in my hand and felt the kind of dread reserved for hospital waiting rooms and unexplained bank notifications. This place had been my wife's dream, long before it had a lease or a menu. I signed the loans, rewired weekends into free labor, and convinced myself that exhaustion could be a kind of romance. The night hissed back at me from the machine, and somewhere under the counter a drip tray clicked, as if counting seconds I hadn't agreed to spend. We called the cafe Vatra because she liked the way the word felt, small and bright like a flame cupped in the hands. In our earlier years, the plans lived on sticky notes and Pinterest boards. Later, they spread into spreadsheets and meetings with landlords who wore disappointment like cologne. When the keys finally landed on our kitchen counter, she cried into a takeout napkin. I mistook relief for gratitude and chose not to name the difference. It felt good to provide. It felt righteous to be the forklift of her ambition and the wall she could lean her ladder against. The pride came with a shadow, though, one I ignored. The thrill I saw in her when a stranger praised her cappuccino while I unclogged the bathroom sink and pretended the compliment had been shared. The neighborhood received the place like a warm blanket. Students settled with laptops and highlighter pens. Nurses passed in the mornings with weary eyes and ready smiles. A man in a navy peacoat began to drift in at odd hours, always alone, always reading something in a language I couldn't place. He had the kind of faith that looked expensive and an accent with rounded edges as if he were polishing every vowel before presenting it. He tipped in cash and pressed his cups into the bin with the tenderness of a rehearsal. When my wife mentioned his name in passing, it slid through the moment like a glass bead. I repeated it later while counting receipts because I didn't like the texture it left in my mouth. Running a cafe is a study in low-level crisis. Milk goes off, the grinder misbehaves, a pipe complains behind the wall and bleeds rust onto mop water. Sleep becomes a kind of rental agreement you sign in pencil. I smiled through the grind because I was building a future, because the someday payoff would smooth the knots in my shoulders. My wife flourished on the other side of the counter. She learned regulars' orders before they opened their mouths. She scheduled art nights and open mics. She wore her hair in a new way that made strangers look twice. When the peacoat man began arriving after close for private tastings, she explained it as networking, a potential wholesale deal with some boutique hotel whose name sounded invented. I finished inventory in the storage room and told myself partnerships formed in strange hours.
Not all hauntings involve the dead. Some are the repeated sounds of a life being balanced without your weight. The security camera I installed for insurance reasons began presenting edits I didn't film. Clips would be there in the morning, with timestamps that overlapped the period I stood cleaning the pastry case. In one, I watched myself carrying a tray while my wife leaned toward the peacoat man in the far booth, her smile tucked down and private. The audio never recorded, but the image carried enough to fill in silence.